Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition, and this is Midday with Reverend Don. Welcome. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments in whatever platform you're watching on, and for most of them, they will show up here in my chat room. The chat room is on the screen because I do not have a guest today, and we can all share the chat room together. And today is our weekly roundup of stories. I haven't done that for the last few weeks, but we do have an interesting story for today. And I'd like to say it was a departure from subjects I commonly talk upon, but it's not. As you know, I've been talking about Project 2025 for a long time, and some people have listened, and some people have said, "Oh, that's nonsense." Um, and now we're kind of watching it going forward. Um, Today's story has to do with the creation of um, what is the word for it? An, an initiative against anti Christian bias, headed by Pam Bondi, who is, I believe, the Attorney General. And this is intended to eliminate and prosecute anti Christian bias in the federal government. Together with that story, released at more or less the same time, is the new White House um, Faith Office, which is headed by the Reverend Paula White, um, who is a televangelist and um, a charismatic evangelical leader. And both of these are completely in keeping with Project 2025. Some people are treating this as the creation of a new inquisition. Other people don't quite see it that way. I think there is certainly room for a lot of abuse with this because what exactly is anti Christian bias in the first place? And secondly, how, in a country that supposedly has no preference for religion, do we need to have a federal initiative on this? The only anti Christian bias that I can think of, um, which to some extent is even what they're citing, are attempts to stop Christians from discriminating against other groups. Um, Obviously, there will be no further attempts in that direction. And hello to Binayak in the chat room. It's good to see you. And hello to Kim Anders in the chat room. And Kim says, wondering what happened to the separation of church and state. Does that not apply at the federal level? And well, yeah, I mean, that's been one of the issues here because one of the goals of Project 2025 has always been to eliminate the separation of church and state. This certainly appears to be a move in that direction. Will that be successful? Will it be completed? Well, we'll find out. Um, but yeah, we have looked to that separation of church and state for protection for a long time, but obviously not now. Hello to Renee in the chat room. But we can't claim to be surprised by this. Project 2025 spelled this all out. We knew it was coming. Hopefully, we're prepared. Now, the fact that this has to do with the federal level um, means that it's not necessarily, at least at this time, directly aimed at us. It is aimed at eliminating things that protect us. It is aimed at um, eliminating things that protect a number of minority communities and basically saying that the Christian community can discriminate against anyone it chooses, and that this is their right to do. And I do not see this as at all a good thing. But again, This was made very clear in Project 2025. If you're not familiar with what's actually in it, I'm sure you can still access it and read the thing. Um, any suggestion that the new administration is not trying to implement it at this point is simply laughable. Um, and hello to Lynn in the chat room who says, hello and frightening thought. Well, yes, it is. It is a frightening thought. Whether we will see it aimed at us as a community is another question, but it certainly is aimed at many of the protections that we have enjoyed for some time now. Also, for those of us who are part of the LGBTQ community, it is a direct attack, really, because the primary place where anti-Christian bias has been an issue has been in their attempt to discriminate against that community. All of the cake bakers and so forth. And hello to Kayleen in the chat room. It's good to see you. And Kayleen says, our governance came from the United Kingdom, where the monarch is the head of the Anglican Church. But that was ruled out by our Constitution. Our conservative parties are starting to copy the US Republicans. My advice to Australians is watch where we're going and really ask yourself, do you want to be there? But yes, a lot of people are copying them, and they themselves are copying others. And Kim says, it was laughable when the connection to Project 2025 was discussed during campaigning and denied. Yeah, for anyone who's been paying any attention, that the attempt to deny backing Project 2025 was pretty laughable. But, a lot of people bought it, and including people in the pagan community, and I just kind of wonder how they feel about that now. So what I've been saying for these many months is still true, that we must be mindful of this agenda, which is coming down, and how we respond to it intelligently and with an eye on the long term, not the short term. And, there are a lot of people out there whose eye is on the short term, because that's all their eye has ever been on. We need to be thinking of long-term policies. And another thing I'm going to say, even though it's probably not going to be popular in some quarters, there are a number of pagan leaders working on a statement of joining with Christian leaders in opposing this. I don't see any Christian leaders opposing this. There was one bishop who said something. I don't see anything else, and I'm not surprised by that, because the good liberal Christians who are so nice and so loving never stand up to the bad ones, and they're not going to now. And if you're thinking they're going to, you're lying to yourself. Of all the possible bridges we can build, it's probably the one that's least helpful, because they are not going to oppose it. They never do. A few individuals may, and those individuals might be worth working with. But as a movement, there are no liberal Christians. They're not going to be there. It is very self-deceptive to think that all the good Christians are going to stand up to this. There's never been a time in history when they did. What they will do is, when this runs itself out and the pendulum turns, they'll step in to say, oh, those weren't real Christians. Don't judge us by them. And we need not to fall for that again, because if they're not opposing them while they're doing it, then yes, they are the real Christians. And we need not to think there was some invisible opposition that never voiced itself. Mark my words, that is what we'll see. And remember that chances are high that, as far as the pagan community goes, you first heard about Project 2025 from me or from Ed the Pagan. And so pay attention to us now. There were a lot of pagan leaders saying, oh, don't worry about this. This isn't real. This is just fear-mongering. remember who said that, and don't be paying attention to them now either, because they were not paying attention to what was very obvious and known for a long time. And yeah, that may not be the nicest thing I've ever said, but this might not be the moment for niceness. This might be the moment for telling it as it is. And speaking of telling it as it is, someone who does that regularly is Byron Ballard. Byron Ballard tells it like it is, and I saw something very interesting on her page this morning, and I thought I would share that with you. And let me just pull that up so that I can do that. And she wrote the following: "Are you noticing some patterns? 3 p.m., another terrible thing. 10 a.m. the following day, rescinded or modified. Noon the same day, horrible weather, disaster. 7 p.m., not so bad. Again and again, shocking things are happening, and the potential for awfulness continues, but maybe we all take a breath, and when the next awful thing is trumpeted across the media, prepare, if there's preparation to be made, but then wait it out for 12 hours and see. This is the plan of the coup makers. Keep it loud, keep it sharp, unnerve as many people as possible." And she goes on to say, "Certainly you are free to continue this emotional roller coaster if it is helping, but is it helping you to cope in these mad times? Are there other techniques that could yield better results for you and your community?" I wanted to share this with you because I think it's extremely good advice. And I'm not saying, and hello to Steve in the chat room, I'm not saying that there aren't some terribly, terribly bad things happening. I am saying do not be distracted from what you can do by the constant barrage of upsetting news. Look back over the last 30 years, and one of the things you'll see is the media constantly churning outrage of one kind or another, which has done nothing positive in the world. So pay attention and react reasonably to situations, but don't allow yourself to be psyched out by them. Don't give up when you have not lost the fight. Because one of the reasons for this constant barrage, because what they're doing is following the Blitzkrieg model. If you do not know what Blitzkrieg is, it means lightning war. It was a Nazi model. It used the idea of a sudden, overwhelming attack to dispirit the opposition and cause them to give in quickly, even if they could have stood up in the long term. And it did overwhelm most of their opponents. Part of the goal here is emotional overwhelming. And as a community, we need not to give in to that. And as important as it is, on one hand, not to give in to the joys of emotional masturbation over meaningless actions in the present, but focus on our long-term plans, it's equally important not to give in to the emotional masturbation of constant upset and feeling that everything has fallen apart when in fact there's still much we can do. It is very easy to become dispirited. It's very easy to take this farther, I think, than they actually plan for it to go, or farther than it may actually go, and just give up. That is the worst thing we can do. We must remain mindful, we must remain determined, and we must stand on our rights. And we must find the practical ways to do this. And I will talk more about what I think are practical ways to do it. And I'll tell you right up front, trying to build bridges to the liberal Christian community, I don't think is a practical way to do this. There are some out there, and if you have individual people who you know will be available to build fellowship with, that's one thing. If we're talking about the interfaith community, that's another. But if you're thinking there's a large group of liberal Christians who are going to step up and oppose this, I think you're fooling yourself. We're much better to join hands with other minority communities who have a lot to lose from this as we do. That is where the bridges need to be built. Liberal Christians stand to lose nothing whatsoever, and they will not stand up. They never have, and they never will, unless they already see the tide has turned. And even then, they're not going to stand up in ways that are helpful to us. Much more sensible to us is to join hands with various ethnic minorities who are being targeted, to join hands with the LGBTQ community, which is being targeted, and to look for other communities that might be targeted, and see if we can find places in the coalitions that will come from that. Those people, like ourselves, have a lot to lose, and they actually will do something, not just sit around and talk. If all we're going to do is sit around and talk, we're not going to get anywhere. And similarly, if we're going to run around like chickens who have lost their heads, we're not going to get anywhere either. We need to reserve our forces for when it will make a difference, and we need to not dissipate our energies in foolishness. Now, expressing displeasure with these policies is not foolishness if you do it in the right way. Write reasonable letters to your government representatives expressing your displeasure with this this direction, and send those letters to everyone who has a reason to listen to you. Make that feeling known in a reasonable way. Do not write a highly emotional letter. That is not helpful. Do not read them the riot act. That is not helpful. Make a reasonable argument for why this is not the right thing to do, why you do not agree with it, and why their supporting it will cost them your support and the support of people like you. That is reasonable. And send it as an email and a physical letter, because that shows that you're serious. Do not be signing online petitions. Nobody takes them seriously, with a very few exceptions. They rarely get to the people that they're intended to influence, with a few exceptions. Those exceptions are if the person or organization that you're trying to influence is the one who's asking for feedback. Well, that's a different matter. Or if it's a well-organized campaign of which the petition is only part. But all over the internet, you have these sites that do these petitions that go nowhere and do nothing. Do not do that and think you have done something, because that is just blowing into the wind. Write an actual letter. Send it through the actual mail. Send it by email. Do both. Talk to people. Express how you feel in reasonable ways. Be mindful of the fact that if you just go off emotionally, your argument will not carry. It will be dismissed. You need to make reasonable, well thought out arguments that are not emotional in character. This is not common for our pagan community. For many years, large numbers of the pagan community have been encouraged and trained to emotional outbursts and to ignoring the thinking part of their mind in favor of the feeling part of their mind. This is not the time for that. That is not the technique we need. We need to use that thinking mind. And yes, pay attention to our emotions, but not be expressing them everywhere. because the people who might be won over to our cause will be alienated by that. For years, I've seen people in the pagan community talk about how they love spirited debate. I do not love spirited debate. We do not need any spirited debate. We need civility, we need intellect, and we need some common sense in what we're doing. Spirited debate is not going to help a damn thing, and it never did. It just divided us. And when we talk, we need to talk civilly. We need to talk with each other sensibly. And when we complain in our letters and our emails about Project 2025 and these various actions, we need to present the face of reasonable people who are going to stand behind what they're saying. We need to make very clear that not only are we saying this, but we will also be voting it. Not only are we saying this, but we will be living it in our daily lives. We will be opposing it wherever we can, legally and lawfully oppose it. And there are some people who feel that we may never really have another election. And we'll find out. However, I guarantee you, for those lesser offices in government, there will be more elections. Those are not the ones that are questionable. And so for your state senators, your state representatives, for your congressional representatives and your national senators, for your governors, these people are all going to have to come back for re-election. And the current administration did not win by a large margin. They barely won. And we need to remember that. We need not to give up before there's even been any real battle back and forth. Many things are going through the courts. I will have to say, I warned you last year, in many ways we've lost the protection of the courts, but we may not have lost it entirely. Many things are still subject to political processes that are still ongoing. And of course, there are things just everyday people can do, including simply not going with the program. And we need to be mindful of this, and we need to do it. Writing highly opinionated letters to the Times is not the answer. It will only make us look like nuts. Thinking that writing a letter in and of itself makes a gigantic difference is also a self-delusion. Not that they don't ever make a difference, but in the context that I'm speaking of are the places where it makes a difference. When you're sending it to people who have a reason to listen to you, because the people who are in office because of your vote have a reason to listen to you. And if they hear from enough people, it will make some difference. But you have to write to them as reasonable people. If you write a letter that reads like you're a nut, it's just going to go in the circular file. Be mindful of not sounding like a nut. When we're upset, even the most reasonable person can come off sounding like a nut, and that is not productive. And for anyone who is offended by the use of the term nut, in my opinion, it fits the moment. We do not want to be easily dismissed. We do not want to appear to be just a group of crazies. We don't want to appear to be just a group of weirdos. We want to appear to be serious people who are going to stand behind what we're saying. Part of that means we also have to be prepared to stand behind what we're saying. And so my question to you is, are you? When we object to something like this initiative against anti-Christian bias, which in any meaningful sense does not exist in this country, because not being allowed to discriminate against people you don't like is not anti-Christian bias. It's enforcing bias against those other people. But are we really going to stand against it? Well, we certainly should, since we're the people um, who they want to discriminate against. We're among them. Granted, the LGBTQ people are higher in their list. Muslims are higher in their list. Um, but nonetheless, we're on that list. And we should be mindful of this. Another thing that I think we should be mindful of is the fact that we're not really high in the list. That actually gives us a little bit more room to work. You can see very clearly their number one priority is attacking the LGBTQ community and certain ethnic minorities. That gives us a little bit more freedom of movement in the short term. But once they have taken care of that, our place in that list moves up. We need to be aware of that. We need not to be thinking that just because we're not high on that list right now, we're not going to be. And we need to remember things these people have done in the past. And, I often refer to the Helms Amendment. And I see no reason to think they're not going to try that again. Again, as I've said before, there are reasons to think it won't be successful. But not much reason to think they won't try it. And for those of you who don't remember, the Helms Amendment was an attempt to define religion in such a way that it excluded any religion that involved the term witchcraft. In fact, the way the current administration is going, they might even try to do it by executive order, because there have been executive orders on a number of things that executive orders cannot legally do. Basically, I think trying to see what they can get away with. We must expect that eventually that attempt is going to be made, and we must be prepared to stand against it. And the best way to stand against it is by standing against all of these attempts to attack various minority groups before it gets to us, but to do it in reasonable ways, in ways that have an actual consequence in the world. There are a lot of things we can do that will give us a momentary emotional feeling of, oh, we did something, that are actually nothing. We need not to do that. It's not the easiest thing for a lot of us to sit down and write a letter to our congressperson, let alone to all of the different people who show up on our voting ballots. But it is the most productive thing we can do. Writing to the equivalent of what used to be the Times, if we do it sensibly, in reasoned and well-spoken ways, is also a sensible thing for us to be doing, but not writing emotional screeds. At all costs, avoid writing emotional screeds. If you feel so emotional about the subject that all you can do is write an emotional screed, well, then write that. Enjoy it, and then throw it away, erase it, and start over, having gotten it out of your system, and then write the reasonable letter. This is not the time for being emotional and opinionated. It's the time for making reasonable and logical arguments that include saying bluntly, this is what we will do. These are the legal and lawful things we will do. And being clear that we are staying within the law, but we are not cooperating with things that we feel violate it, or things that we feel violate common decency. And as we go forward in coming months, I will be speaking much more about this. And I hope that everyone will be thinking more about this and taking these actions. Because they are some of the actions we can take. Now, another thing I've seen some people doing is protesting. And is this a practical thing? Well, it may be. It may be. There have been times in the world that has made a distinct difference. but you have to be prepared to stick with it and stand behind it. Um, and I think that we have to be very cautious in how we proceed in general to make sure that we're taking reasonable actions and we're taking them at the right times. So that's my program for today. I want to take a moment for a message from our sponsors because we love our sponsors, as you know. And, well, here we go.
Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours.
And thank you to our sponsors, Equinox Learning Hub, and Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, and Gaia Thrift in general. And if you go to the Gaia Thrift Facebook page, you will, or to our eBay site, which is ebay.com user Gaia Thrift, you'll find a number of interesting things being offered, including some rare tarot decks that I consider particularly good, notably the Tarot of the Ages, the Maya Tarot, and several other really good ones that are being offered as a set for $75. I highly recommend getting that set because actually I think you would spend that for any of the individual tarots in the set, let alone the whole thing. So have a look at the many things we're offering. I think you'll find it interesting. And I think my last comment for today is that it's very easy for us to think the sky is falling and the world is ending. And there certainly are people who would like to end our world for us. But let's not hand that to them, because they have not actually brought our world to an end, and it would be very foolish of us to behave as if they have. Let us instead marshal our forces, act reasonably, and keep our heads about us as we go forward, and see if we cannot build that better future that we hope for. And hello to Shocker Allen in the chat room. It's good to see you. And thank you, everyone, for joining me. I hope that you have enjoyed the program. I'll be back on Monday. And until then, let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we rejoice in this walk we walk together, and we ask you to help us to take positive and constructive actions in building the future we want to see. When we face obstacles or oppositions, let us use our thinking minds to find the best way to overcome these and move beyond them. Let us not be overawed or shocked into silence and inactivity when there is much that we can do. Let us rather find the practical ways to do what is in our power to bring about the future we want to see. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, and knowing you are always with us from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence. May you be blessed now and always. And I'll see you on Monday.